I'm Mark Smelly Bell, and today we're going to be talking about how to stay lean year-round without tracking your calories. I'm here with my boy,
Nsima Inyang.
And we are going to make this as black and white as we possibly can for you guys. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be hard. We don't need to have a bunch of science behind it. We can just simply do some of the things we're going to list out in this video. What are some things that you've done to stay lean year-round?
So I think what I want to mention first is that we ended up coming to the same point where we are now with the different things that we've done in the past. So I came from a place of flexible dieting, the IFYM crowd, where you track everything, right? But slowly as I did that, I got to a spot where I kind of understood how much to eat, but then I landed at the same spot that you currently are, but you did the whole thing without ever really having tracked. So we're doing the same stuff.
Right. I basically got rid of a macronutrient. I got rid of carbs. You know, people might know I wrote a book called The War on Carbs, and I did a ketogenic style diet. What I think is important to lay out for people is that in both cases, the calories still count.
Absolutely.
They still need to be accounted for. It's just that the way that I chose to do it, they were accounted for just by cutting out a macronutrient. By cutting out carbohydrates as an energy source for me, it helped me day in and day out to learn how to eat in a caloric deficit.
Absolutely.
And hang out there.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things, the biggest first thing that I think people need to kind of wrap their heads around, and what I had to wrap my head around, was that we need to prioritize protein. You talk a lot about protein leveraging within the podcast. Right. So protein is super satiating. If you have protein at the beginning of your meals, you don't tend to eat as much. And I think a general good guideline is like 1 gram of protein per pound.
Right. So this is rule number 1. Prioritize your protein. What kind of proteins do you eat?
I love steak. Like, I mean, Piedmontese, it doesn't have a lot of fat, so it doesn't have that many calories, but it has a great amount of protein per serving. So I can eat a lot of that. I mess with eggs a lot. I used to eat chicken breast back in the day, but I don't eat it that much anymore because the steak I have doesn't have that much fat. But I mean, chicken's also good.
I heard you mention pork belly?
Pork belly.
Can people eat pork belly and stay lean?
Yeah, no, so that's the thing. It's like, since I got to the same place where I'm very low carb, some days I don't have any carbs, and my high carb days are like 150 carbs, which isn't high at all. But I got to that spot again by prioritizing protein, and fat is my next biggest macronutrient, because for athletes, men and women, fat is super important for hormonal health. So I prioritize fat over carbohydrates.
You know, you're going to have to pick or choose, you know, carbohydrates or fat. You can obviously eat both of them, but for the most part, I think you're best off trying to pick a lane and stick with it. So if you're going to have a high amount of carbohydrates, you're going to usually want to lower the amount of fat that you're going to consume. If you're going to raise up the amount of fat that you're going to consume, you're going to want to lower the carbohydrates. Approximately for yourself, being 240-ish pounds, how many carbohydrates do you eat in a day?
So this is the really cool thing. I mean, I started doing a little bit of carnivore when you started talking about it a few years ago, but nowadays my diet transfers between carnivore, meaning some days I have no carbs at all if I don't feel like it. My high day of carbohydrates, so I do jujitsu and lifting, so it could be a day that I just have a lot of work. That high day is maybe 150 grams of carbs, no more than that. And that's not a lot of carbohydrates for a 240-pound individual. So it could be no carbs on some days, high days of 150 carbs, but my average would probably be 100 grams of carbs in a day. How about you?
Yeah, for me, it's almost identical. I don't eat a whole lot of carbohydrates. There could be a day or a night where I have some like sushi or something like that, and now the carbs go from like having hardly any to maybe having about 300 like I probably did last night. But for the most part, I'm protein minded. I'm protein first, protein as a priority, and then I let everything else kind of fall into place from there. I don't really necessarily go after eating fatty foods, although I will have some bacon sometimes. I will have cheese. I will eat whole eggs. I will eat some sources of meat that are fatter, just like a ribeye or something like that. But I'm not like, you know, pouring oil on stuff. I'm not putting like tons of butter on anything, because I know I'm going to get the fats in anyway, because the amount of protein that I'm going to eat, the protein is going to be accompanied by at least some sort of fat. Do you kind of do the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I like my snack. I think this kind of is going to lead us to the second part. But if I start to feel a little bit hungry throughout the day, I'll usually grab some eggs. Like I'll grab some protein, because after eating that, it'll like gauge me like how hungry are you actually. People, if you notice, like when you start your meal with carbohydrates or like, you know, easy carbs, you start to feel hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. That's why like Chinese food, you can just take that shit down so easily. So good. Yeah, but I always prioritize and start with protein because it makes you actually feel full. and it just makes that aspect super easy. But I think also with all the foods that you just mentioned, it leads us into the idea that we don't really snack. Like, I don't have snack foods around. When I eat meals only at meals, right? And I don't mess with liquid calories because you won't even realize it, but you'll be taking in all of these extra calories through nuts, through like bars, through peanuts, through all these different things throughout the day, and that can lead you to being in a big surplus.
You can expend, or you can consume a lot of calories by picking at appetizer type foods and eating cheese and meat and all these different things. Even though those things still might be part of your diet, you might just be consuming extra calories that you really don't need. If you can be patient and you can hang in there, you're probably about to eat a steak at a restaurant or something like that. And so doing your best to abstain from some of those things. I do the exact same thing that he's talking about. The only liquid calories that I have would come from like a protein shake, but even the protein shake is surrounded by my meals because I have a short eating window. I go with about a 5 to 6 hour eating window, and within that eating window, once I'm done with like my second meal, I usually eat about twice a day. Once I'm done with my second meal, I have like a protein shake just to kind of satisfy the sweet tooth and to kind of cap the night off with a little extra protein.
Let's actually talk about that eating window that you're talking about. Outside of that eating window, a lot of people are like, well, then what do you do throughout the rest of the day? How do you not feel hungry? What are some hacks that you use so that you don't feel too hungry throughout the day? Because I do something very similar as far as the eating window is concerned, which I'll mention after.
I think number one for me is to occupy your mind. Find a way to consume some time. With Nsima, it's jiu-jitsu. With me, it's probably walking. I spend a lot of time walking. I walk multiple times a day. You guys see some of the videos. I post about it all the time. Hit up some 10-minute walks. I think it can be really important. Also training. When I come in the gym and I train, that's like an appetite suppressant. I'm not going to eat a sandwich while I'm lifting weights. And a few other things that help, just work and just being busy. So figure out a way to stay occupied. Another way that I do it is through some coffee. Coffee seems to help with the fast quite a bit. Some of you might find that chewing gum just keeps you kind of away from food. You're not going to be chewing gum and eating something else at the same time. But really, whatever way you got to do it, we both like Element. We use a hydration packets, and it gives you a flavor. It gives you something to do. Maybe for some of you, you might think diet drinks are okay or something like that. But we're really just trying to front half of the day or the beginning part of the day is for as long as you can kind of handle. We're just trying not to really consume calories.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of harp the fact on the electrolytes. The electrolytes, because I do a lot of my jiu-jitsu training fasted, almost all my lifting sessions are fasted, and adding electrolytes into the mix, sodium, potassium, magnesium, has made the biggest difference as far as my performance is concerned, just because a majority of people are electrolyte deficient. Like, you'll drink a lot of water, you'll stay hydrated, and then you'll be like, why am I cramping up? Why am I not feeling good? A lot of people get signals mixed up, so when they're electrolyte deficient, they'll actually think they're hungry. Whereas if you actually just had electrolytes, which are perfectly okay to have while you're fasting, you'll realize that you're hydrated, you feel good, you have a great amount of energy, and now you can actually hit your workout or whatever you're going to do without feeling hungry.
I think being low calorie, it would take 4 or 5 days for you to feel like you're going to like pass out during a workout or something from being low calorie. However, if your hydration is off, it might be lights out for you a lot sooner. You might run into some difficulties. So we got rule number 1 is protein priority. Rule number 2 was it to lessen carbohydrates?
No snacking. Okay. So rule 1, prioritizing protein. We're pretty low carb. Rule 2, no snacking, no liquid calories, eat meals at meals. Rule 3, we utilize some like intermittent fasting. I don't fast every single day. There's some days that I like, if I just feel like not fasting for the day, I'll kind of eat throughout the day, but I'll still stick to eating meals. So I might eat 2 or 3 meals, right? But I just won't fast all day long. So if you guys do want to pick up that habit, if you do it every single day, you might notice that you start to feel tired after a few days. Just don't fast on one day. That's perfectly okay. Anything you want to mention more about fasting?
Yeah, like when do you eat? Like what time of day do you eat? Like what are the two, because you eat twice a day as well,
I
right?
eat twice a day. There's some meals that I eat one massive meal. Like they're just some days I just eat one massive meal.
He can eat some enormous amounts of food. It's pretty awesome.
I can put it down. Usually I have my first meal around like 6 p.m. Okay, if it's a 2-meal day, it'll be 6 p.m., then another meal at 8 p.m., and then I'm in bed. If it's a 1-mealer, then it might be at 7 p.m., and I'll I'll cook up a bunch of meat, cook up a bunch of eggs, maybe a little bit of rice. My diet is so simple, but I just enjoy it. So it is what it is. So go for it. Ask the professor.
What about a cheat meal?
Oh, cheat meals. Okay, so this is the thing. It's like
always comes up, right?
Always comes up. I don't look at cheat meals as cheats. It's like if I want to go out to a restaurant, let's say a friend wants to go out to dinner, or somebody just wants to go out, then I'll go out and I'll do that. But I'll strategize for it. So when I work with people and they're like, I'm going to be going on a cruise soon, or me and my wife want to go out to this restaurant.
You're not like, all right, get all your Tupperware together, get a bunch of chicken breasts from Costco and...
Yeah, no. I think one good strategy, first off, is eating a little bit of protein before that meal. You talk about this all the time. The meal before the meal. You had a better way of saying it, but
something like that.
Something like that. Because when you eat a little bit of protein or have a protein shake before your meal, when you actually go have this cheat meal, you're going to have better control over yourself in terms of the amount of food that you actually eat. So I would suggest that if you're going to have a cheat meal or go out to dinner and you know you're going to eat a lot at this random restaurant, fast throughout the day if you can. Because now when you go and you eat at that restaurant, you can now enjoy all the food that you want for the most part, and it's going to be very difficult for you to go vastly over your caloric goal or eat a crazy amount of calories that'll mess you up for the next few days.
One thing I want to add is that when I was 330 pounds, I was consuming a lot of food. Now I'm 230 pounds. I lost 100 pounds. I was consuming a lot of food. I would follow whatever I wanted to eat. I would follow my taste buds. And I have to say, when I was 330 pounds, when I was at that weight, I was hungrier then than I am now with fasting. So I know it sounds counterintuitive and it sounds odd, but you're going to be hungry anyway is my point. And so you may as well just learn how to get comfortable with it. There are some strategies you can employ. Some of the things that we mentioned, you may find will decrease your hunger, but you're going to get hit by hunger a couple times a day, every day. What I'd like you guys to practice and work on is having some control over that. Do you really feel like, do you really need to eat? Or do you just want to eat?
Yeah.
And fasting has been transformative for me. It's helped me a ton to be able to control my food. And then even when it is time to eat, which this took a really long time, I learned a lot better control even when it was time to eat with making better food choices. So if you, basically what we're saying in short is that if you make excellent food choices, you don't necessarily have to weigh your food. You don't have to track your macros. You don't have to do all these things. We're not saying those things aren't effective. Nsima went very far in bodybuilding by utilizing those strategies. When I did a bodybuilding show, I was still counting calories. So we're not saying by any means that that's not effective. It can be tremendously effective, but this is what we've found so that we don't have to count, so we don't have to track.
I haven't pulled out a scale in more than 2.5 years, right? And I've
You do weigh yourself though.
I do weigh myself.
Right.
I do weigh myself, and
So that's a little bit of a way to track, because if you see yourself going up or down too much, right?
You can like be like,
Add
oh, I
food.
need to eat a little bit more for the next few days, or I got to eat a little bit less. But yeah, I haven't pulled out a scale in the last 2.5 years as far as a food scale, and I've stayed within this 240 to 250 range consistently.
We always have to mention sleep.
Oh,
like if you don't have your sleep together,
You're
it's
shooting
your
yourself in the
foundation.
foot. Yeah, it's useless. Everything else you do if you're not getting a good amount of sleep.
Anything that you've done that it helped improve your sleep? For me, I bought an eye mask, which is really simple. But you can get one for like $10, $6 on Amazon, something like that. That's been really effective for me. I think that you still mouth tape, right?
I still use mouth tape, so I'm breathing through my nose when I sleep, because when you snore or if you wake up with a dry mouth, your sleep quality is going down the window. Just go watch our podcast with Patrick McHugh and you'll get all the information there. And then also, I use those blue blockers. I have actually noticed that they make a difference in terms of me feeling sleepier as I get to bed. And last thing on that,
Are those the glasses that are like red or orangey?
I have orange ones and I have the blue blockers that are clear. Whichever one you can get your hands on,
Right,
good.
right.
But the ones that are orange they'll block more blue light at night.
Right.
So yeah. And then one more thing on that note, Alan Flanagan, we had him on. He told us don't eat too close to bedtime. That's made a difference for me, because I used to wet the bed with sweat because I'd eat too close before sleeping.
Yeah.
And that's made a big difference for me too.
That's made a big difference for myself as well, but that one was very difficult to change, and I still struggle with it. Before we hop on out of here, I'd like you to read this quote to people, because this has a lot to do with counting and tracking, and I do want you guys to really understand that counting stuff, just because we choose not to count things, they still count. This is from Albert Einstein.
Okay. Everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. God dang.
Yeah.
Albert.
Ponder that one. I'm Mark Smelly Bell.
Nsima Inyang.
Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never a strength. Catch you guys later.